What's up, chat? I'm Dibbles, and welcome back to dibbles.dot.esports. So this series I'm starting is going to be dedicated to the teams that qualify into Masters Bangkok at the end of February. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the VCT China Kickoff results for our first team, Edward Gaming, or EDG. But before we start, for those who may not know what the Valorant Champions Tour is, here's a quick refresher. The Valorant Champions Tour, or the VCT, is the Tier 1 circuit for Valorant esports. There are 4 regions across the globe: China, EMEA, Americas, and Pacific. Each region consists of 10 partner teams and 2 Ascension teams. Partner teams were chosen by Riot themselves to play in their leagues on a 5-year contracts. Ascension teams come from the Tier 2 scene through the Challenger circuit, which leads into an Ascension tournament at the end of the year, which puts the best Tier 2 teams across the micro regions together for the chance to get a temporary spot in the Tier 1 division. I'll go into more detail on the Tier 1, Tier 2 system in a different video, but just know that overall, every region has 12 teams that compete in the Tier 1 division at any given time. At the beginning of each year, each region hosts their respective kickoff tournament. This is a double elimination playoff tournament to qualify for the first international Masters event of the season. Afterwards, teams play a regional Stage 1 tournament to send the top 3 teams to play in the second Masters event of the year. Teams play one final regional tournament, this being the Stage 2 tournament, where the top 2 teams from the tournament and the top 2 teams based on overall champs points qualify to VCT Champions. This is the most prestigious tournament in Valorant esports. Champs points are collected throughout the season based on results and placements, but as the season goes on, I'll go over how everything fits together through the different stages. Now that we've got the basics of VCT out the way, now we're going to focus in on our first region, VCT China. Since China speedran the tournament in 2 weeks, we already have our first 2 teams going to Masters Bangkok, that being our first seed, Edward Gaming, and our second seed, Trace Esports. We'll start with our first seed, Edward Gaming. EDG were the VCT Champs winners of 2024, and they're hands down the best Chinese team in Valorant for the past couple of years, especially the last 2 years. They always placed first in the region. Last year, they qualified to each Masters event, where they didn't perform to their expectations, but in Champs, they made a remarkable run to beat Team Heretics and be crowned the Valorant champions. And in the offseason, they retained all their Champs players, with Haodong and After leaving for Titan Esports Club, and adding in Sentry as an assistant coach. Muggle was a assistant coach before, and then basically took over and helped. I would say an instrumental part of them winning champs. So he's been promoted to head coach since then. Now, if you don't know the name Kong Kong, now you do because I just told you. But he is the face of VCT China and EDG Star Duelist. He was named the Champs MVP and got iced out for it too. That's a Diamond Champs bracelet. He is one of 2 people to have that as well. The other one being Fluorescent, who currently plays for Apex. Now, in the past 2 years, we've seen Champs winning teams split apart in the case of Loud or EG, but EDG are the first Champs winning team to retain their full roster going into the new year. In my personal opinion, this puts them at a huge advantage leading into Bangkok, but also honestly leading into any international tournament, given how much experience they now have and how, dominant they are in China. And since they've been in VCT for such a long time, they have the advantage of experience, which I personally believe to be a huge factor when deciding what teams can make deep runs or not. And now we're going to see a champs winning roster, which stayed together in the offseason, compete in a new meta with agents like Vice and Teho coming into the mix. It's going to be a challenge for sure, but it's also going to be exciting to see whether or not EDG can win another trophy for China. So let's go into how their kickoff tournament went. So the way that the regional kickoff tournaments work is that the top 4 teams that went to champs in the previous season get a bye into the upper quarterfinals. The rest of the 8 teams get randomly sorted into the upper round 1. So EDG being champs winners and obviously the first seed of China, they got to go into the upper quarterfinals where they first went against Nova Esports. It wasn't a complete stomp, but it was a clean 2-0 with a 13-8 and a 13-10 on split fracture respectively. But the first upset came in the upper semis where EDG went against Trace, getting stomped on Lotus and Vine 13-4 each. And this was a big whoa, first Trace are good, and 2, what the hell happened to EDG? And we'll get into this, but I think it came down to a comp problem. But getting sent down to lower round 3, Edward Gaming went against Zhilai Gaming, or XLG, which are the recently ascended Chinese team who are formidable in their own right, and they're showing their potential in this tournament. Although they got eliminated by EDG at this round, it's still something. it's still something to get eliminated by the champs winners, and actually kind of putting up a fight as the series went to 2-1. They beat EDG on Lotus, but then EDG kind of 13-10 them on Bind, and then it got bad, man. Like EDG 13-0 them on Haven. And now I gotta talk about the following matchup against Dragon Ranger Gaming, or DRG. For some reason, during the map selection, and we can look at it here, DRG are Team A, and EDG are Team B. So that means that DRG get the first map ban. So they ban Fracture. EDG follows up with their, obviously their Abyss ban. DRG, for whatever reason, seeing EDG freshly 13-0 XLG, decided, nah, we're different, and we can do better. And they pick Haven against them. So since they picked Haven, EDG got to pick the side that they, were gonna play on first. So guess where? Oh my god, I can't, man. Like guess where EDG went? Just like in the XLG game, they had chose attack first, and they end up stomping DRG 13-0. Insane veto decision that, like, I put me in there, bro. Like anyone can tell you to not pick Haven coming off of a fresh 13-0. Like, DRG played a mirror comp, and not a single player went positive. And it's like, DRG asked for it, right? You give them the Haven first pick, they get 13-0'd, and then, they put up a fight, kinda, in Pearl, going 13-9. But at that point, EDG were also firing on all cylinders, so crazy work there. And EDG made light work of BLG. It was a 3-0. The Pearl was 14-12, and I think from there, BLG kind of just boomed out, getting 13-6 and 13-5 on the Haven Lotus. But, it happens. Edward Gaming confirmed their spot in Masters Bangkok, and they went against a rematch in the grand finals against Trace Esports. Now, I thought personally this would be a more competitive series, but EDG were kind of back in their groove of things, and they showed why they're China's best Valorant team and the face of VCT China, where they lost the Lotus 12-14 in overtime, and then the Bind was also a 13-11. The Abyss went to a 16-14, which is interesting because EDG perma-banned Abyss throughout this tournament run, and they actually won Abyss to win champs last year against Team Heretics. But then after that Abyss OT win, they absolutely stomped Trace on Fracture, winning 13-2 and confirming their spot as the China first seed going into Masters Bangkok. Overall, it was a pretty entertaining tournament to follow. I wasn't able to watch most of these matches, but it was really funny. DRG are a funny team. Very funny. Very, very funny team. We're a quirky team type shit. So now we're going to look at the maps that EDG played in Kickoff. And over here is a data sheet that I created just to keep track of like everything. The maps banned, maps picked, the maps won, and the maps lost. And then also the maps chosen against what teams. A lot of colors here, but the good thing is that there are colors. First, starting with their bans, EDG perma-banned Abyss consistently, which is interesting considering they beat Heretics in the Champs final, but I think with the new meta changes, they weren't feeling as confident on it. They do have around 3 weeks to refine their Abyss, so we can potentially see it be floated back into their picks or as a third map in Masters Bangkok. Their second bans had more variety. In the beginning, they banned Lotus and Pearl against Nova and Trace, but then in the lowers against XLG and DRG, they banned Split. In the lower final, they only got one map ban, so that ban was going to be Abyss. And then against Trace got the first and second ban, and also first pick, which is crazy. So EDG couldn't ban a single map, but they did end up playing Abyss and winning Abyss. So why I said that a lot of colors here is a good sign is because in terms of the maps picked, EDG picked Fracture, Bind, Lotus, Pearl, Haven, 5 completely different maps, and they won on most of them. As we can see, when they picked Fracture against Nova, they won. They did lose the first Bind against Trace, but that was a 2-0 stomp. Against XLG, they actually lost the Lotus again, and we'll get into the Lotus details later. But against DRG, they won Pearl. Against BLG, they won the Haven pick. And then against Trace, they won the Bind and Fracture pick. So with EDG winning their map picks, this is a pretty good sign for fans to show that, they're consistent. They're consistently winning what they choose. And although they did lose to Lotus and Bind initially, they did pick it up changing their compositions to find wins on those maps. It's easier to see with Bind, as when they lost to Trace in the first match, going against XLG and Trace again actually, when they changed their comp, they were able to find 2 wins. Lotus is probably just their weaker map, and when we go into their compositions, we'll see maybe what happened and maybe like what reasons could be for that. But they were able to find 1 win on Lotus against BLG after changing their comp. EDG won 12 maps across the 16 that they played, which gives them a 75% win rate. Although this is a really good stat on the surface, I hold this percentage with a little weight. Trace won 7 out of their 11 games, but that gave them a 63% win rate. But Trace played 5 less maps than EDG. So when you're comparing those percentages, like one team played more games, one team just won more games, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that the team winning more games, it has a higher win rate, because they can have more closer series like that go 2-1 or 3-2. But if a team is playing more games, or more series rather, and they're 2-0, 3-0 stomping teams, then that will boost the win rate, and it'll help the win rate because they're playing more maps and more matches. Looking back at the maps lost, EDG lost Lotus 3 times and they lost Bind once. The first Lotus and Bind loss was to Trace, while the second Lotus loss was to XLG after a comp change. But even after a comp change, they did win Bind against them. They didn't float Bind or Lotus against DRG, but in the lower finals against BLG, they were able to win on Lotus. They did win Bind against Trace in the finals, but they started off losing on Lotus. So it looks like Lotus is their weaker map, and potentially that could become a permaban. But I think what's more likely to happen is that they're going to either kind of let it become a second map ban, or they're just going to try to let it be a third map and try to win series by 2-0ing other teams. But I think that if they adopt a different comp, and we can look into the different comps that they could try adapting to, I think Lotus could become a solid map for them. The consequence of this success is that there's a lot of VOD footage out there for teams to anti-strat EDG on. So unless EDG change comps in the 2-3 weeks that they have before the tournament, it's a double-edged sword. So we have to see how EDG adapt and clean up their mistakes, and how other teams are going to anti them, and what EDG can do to adapt to them on the stage. What I wanted to highlight on this slide is how many times that EDG won per map. They've won the most on Haven, which included the 13-0 stomps, and they've won once on Abyss, Lotus, and Split. They've won twice on Pearl and Fracture and Bind, and honestly, this is just really good for EDG. Having a deep map pool and having the ability to win on these maps is very important. Of course, Lotus is their weakest map since they've lost to it 3 times, twice to Trace, and they found success with the Sova swapping in for the Fade, but I still don't believe in this comp, and I think they do need to add in a Senti, whether that be a Vice or a Cypher. What they've shown is that they have the ability to adjust in a quick amount of time. Whether they lost a map or lost a series, they've been able to bounce back, and bounce back dominantly. When teams are going against EDG, they should look to ban Haven against them. EDG are most likely going to ban Abyss and Lotus as first or second pick, so floating in a Lotus, Split, or an Abyss into the map series may help teams get a 1 map lead ahead of them. However, it's not going to be enough, as the rest of their map pool is very strong, and if you allow a Haven or a Bind, and I would argue a Fracture and Pearl to become like third maps or become EDG's map picks, is going to take teams more than just having a good map pool against EDG to win matches against them. For this slide, I'm going to be focusing on the compositions that didn't work out for EDG initially against Trace. With the Lotus, you have a Neon, Fade, Omen, Clove, and Breach. So you have a double initiator, double controller comp that lacks a Sentinel. This is a very attack-sided comp, and I understand why, because Lotus is a very attack-sided map. So for EDG, their game plan is basically to take control of space and either sandwich or just fully take control of sites on their attack, and on defense, pretty much take control of map extremities, just so that you can funnel the enemies into a different site. Or you can play heavy retake as well, because you have a lot of util you can use. So when they did lose to Trace with that comp, they switched to a Neon Sova. So I think, if I had to guess why they did this, and also they lost 2 times again with this, so this is like this wasn't a complete comp change, but I think they changed from the Fade to Sova because their initiator player, Nobody, he crutches Sova. So I think it was more of a comfort change, but I do think this comp needs more work on. Looking at their initial bind comp, they ran a Raze, Taeho, Brimstone, Viper, Sky. Again, it's another double controller, double initiator comp, but me personally, I kind of consider Viper a pseudo sentinel because her decay effects on her util pretty much stop people from entering sites or passing through them because they take a chunk of health that, I mean, it does quickly regenerate, but that in pro play, that reaction time, it pretty much negates it. So you don't want to be it puts attackers or defenders, it puts anyone crossing that smoke in an instant disadvantage. But again, there's no sentinel. It's really hard to know if you're being pushed or if people are entering your site unless, again, you're fast taking extremities or playing retake. I did like the change they made, which is they did a Raze, Taeho, Brimstone, Vice, and KO. And this is also the only comp that EDG ran that incorporated Taeho and Vice, the newest agents in this season, actually, or in this meta. So it was interesting to see, and they found success on it. And honestly, I like this comp way more. With Sky, her flashes are good, but again, her heal, okay, and her heal is good. Okay, right. If you're gonna compare Sky and KO, right, her flash is good. Her flash, if it was rechargeable, she would be OP, and this is like a great map for her because you can have so much control with it. But since you have two flashes, you have to be very careful of when you use them and what the timings are. With KO, his knife is just, it has more value. His knife has more value because it tells you exactly what agents are there. If it hits someone, it disables their util, so it pauses and delays like side execs, for example. With KO's flashes, if you put a good initiator, like a flash initiator, on Sky or KO, they'll find this they'll find about equal value with both flashes. But I think with KO's util denial with his knife and his ult, and also his molly, which again stalls enemies at chokeholds, also just denies planting or denies diffusing. It's just better util compared to the dog, which again, yeah, it's recon, but the dog's been nerfed to the ground low key. So I'd rather choose the KO. With the Vice, I really like the Vice because she's very strong on bind, which has very tight chokeholds, and like her util is just insane, like an unbreakable wall. If you know how to place her razor vines, they can take a large area outside of the chokeholds. So for example, out of hookah or out of octagon, that area, if you time it correctly, you can flash. There's a wall that might be up from one of the chokeholds. You pop the razor vines, they take damage, they're flashed, it's an easy kill. Or if you combo it well, they're stuck in the razor vines. You get a Raze nade, a Taeho stun. The util combos are way better in this new comp that they brought out than it was in the previous. And then on this side, I just wanted to look over just their comps in general. They played a lot of double initiator, which is kind of a macro meta theme for most comps, just because you have more rechargeable util, and then also more, you don't need to, like, you can set up other players besides your duelist with the flash or with the scan. So just the teams are adopting this more often. But what is surprising is how many double initiator, double controller comps that they ran, because on 4 maps they did the double initiator, double controller. On 2 maps it didn't work, but they kept it for Lotus and removed it for Bind. So it did go down to 3 maps that had this comp. But with Split, with Viper, again, pseudo Sentinel, and you can take a lot of map control. I'm not really I don't really consider it. Personally, I don't really consider it a double controller comp, but technically. But the Abyss Astra Omen is kind of common, and they ran a pretty default Abyss comp too. With the Omen they replaced the Cypher, so that's also interesting. But with Abyss is such a bad map. You just, bro, if you saw like the map I saw today against at the time of recording this, today, January 30th. Fnatic and Gentlemates played on Abyss, which was Gentlemates map pick. Jesus Christ. Fnatic were on attack first, and they just ran every single round. And I think, okay, I'm not saying it's a comp problem, but it's a map problem. And also just, I don't know why Gentlemates just didn't stack A, because, oh my god, Fnatic actually didn't go B one round. They went A every single round. They won 11 rounds in the first half just going A. They lost the last round because they kind of defaulted, but also No, not really. They defaulted going towards A, but then Gentlemits kind of just cooked up a 3-man mid push, and it just worked out. But like, oh my god, this map is so bad. I can honestly understand why EDG even banned it too, bro. It's like, even though they won this map, they won champs on this map, bro. The map design is just so bad. That like mid is just terrible. But what do I know? I'm just a fan. I am but a fan. Honestly, it was another classic EDG performance in their kickoff this year. But some things to take away are that China is closing the gap between the top, which is like EDG, and the bottom teams. And then the middle of the pack teams like Trace, BLG, DRG, you can even maybe consider XLG. I mean, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of their Ascension run last year. But each of these, the middle of the pack teams, they're improving with each tournament and getting more experience in the global stage by qualifying as second, third, fourth. It brings more understanding of Valorant into China, and the region's just growing and growing, especially after EDG won champs. Valorant in China did, I think, believe, popped off. So the more people, the more eyes, the more players who get inspired by players like the fans who get inspired by players like Hong Kong. They want to play the game. They might find a hidden talent, and it betters the competitiveness of China as a region. Even though like China was accepted into the VCT a year behind the other regions, it's growing more competitive and becoming better at a rapid pace. So on one hand, it's good, it's great for the region, and it's amazing that they have a champs win under their belt. It also puts more pressure on EDG to maintain their dynasty, because if the moment they hit a slump and the moment they become complacent, any of these teams like Trace, they're going to be kicking for the throne, and they'll be able to overtake them too. It only takes two in these double elimination tournaments. It only takes 2 bad days, you know? So such is the case in the world of competition. But EDG have shown that they can indeed keep up and adapt to the meta and learn from their mistakes at a fast pace, which showed in the kickoff tournament. And honestly, I have this team making it to the Bangkok Grand Finals. Of course, I want to see the other teams from the rest of the regions, because if you have teams like G2, Sentinels, Heretics, and Gen GT1, if they meet their expectations, these are the teams that are also like title contenders. But if those teams for some reason don't make it to Bangkok, then honestly, this is EDG's tournament to lose. Now we've reached the end of the video, so if you made it this far, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. This is the first time I've ever done like a proper YouTube video with like full editing and like thought and a concept behind it, and not just like some random ass, like montage of like Call of Duty clips or whatnot, right? So I do appreciate if you took the time to listen to me yap, listen to me rant. There's going to be more of that coming, as the next video will probably be China's second seed, Trace Esports, and then I'm probably going to go and do 6 more videos for the remaining teams that qualify for Masters Bangkok, and then probably kind of go and focus onto Americas for VCT analysis. But this was a fun experience. So I got into Valorant in 2020 when it released after beta, and I got into the esports when Masters Berlin happened during the Gambit run. And then I'm an OG Sen fan, OG Optic Gaming fan, and from there I've watched the VCT develop into what it is now, a very successful esports. And this is the 5th year that the VCT is going on, so I'm excited that now I'm contributing to that community. My goal for this channel is to create a community of people who enjoy Valorant, enjoy like the theory of Valorant, whether that be just the meta analysis of what teams choose, what maps, what agents, what comps are played, what works, what doesn't, what the percentages and what the numbers look like. Stuff like that really I love that, and I love analyzing it and seeing what we can learn from it. Of course, I'm going to have power ratings and predictions that are going to be completely wrong. Do not ask about my pick'ems. They're chalked. But, it's fun, and it's fun to engage with people who also enjoy that and have that passion. So, if you have that passion, if you want to also, join me on learning or join me on seeing how the season pans out, like, subscribe, that'll help me out. And also, if you have any suggestions of what I can do better or what I can change to better the quality of my own video, I know this is not probably the perfect one, but with more time, with more practice, there'll be more improvement, and If you have any suggestions, leave that in the comment section below. And yeah, this is Dibbles. Welcome to dibbles.esports, and I'll catch you in the next one.